Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show. I'm coming to you from the North Shore of Oahu, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I've found along the way. This podcast is brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show. And today I'm so excited to introduce Brant Pinvidic on a podcast, to have him here today to share his story as a filmmaker, an author, an all-around amazing, nice Canadian dude. Thanks for coming on. Why don't you share with us a little bit of your story? I mean, I have to just quickly tell my audience that I read your book, The 3-Minute Rule, when I was trying to pitch my first television show, when I used it and read it on double speed so I could get, there it is, you got there, amazing. So Brant Pinvidic, you guys, if anybody cares about learning about pitching anything, this isn't just for film and television. This would be, I think, for anything you want to sell and pitch. I mean, whether it's explaining like your elevator pitch about who you are and what you do or your business, or just explaining, your faith, whatever, right? I feel like the spectrum is so broad, but basically it's a tried and true premise for how to hold attention and convince the value proposition to your listener, your audience. And anyway, I listened to this book in order to pitch a television show concept, and was able to get some A-list talent, and then able to get a major studio involved, and all of this because of Brant. So Brant, you're the man. Why don't you start with sharing a little bit about your journey, your story, what got you into filmmaking and television, and do all that you do, what you're doing now, which is super exciting. On the road.
That's an intro.
Well, you're the best. I'm so excited for everyone to learn from you because you have so much to share, and now you're a public speaker, right? You're doing so many great things in consulting.
So, I was a television producer for the last 20 years. I had a really good run, reality TV and some film. And my job primarily was to create and pitch the television shows. And what you're doing in that world is you're basically pitching air. There's nothing there. You have no product to sell. You're just pitching the sort of promise of what's out there and what could be. And that's very difficult to do, particularly when you're pitching the head of the network, who was most likely and almost every time a better producer than I was and had been in the business longer. So what am I supposed to be talking about, right? So I developed a very specific system during that time of saying not what I wanted to say, but saying what needed to be said, and only that. And the shorter, concise, very to the point pitches started to have a real resonance in the industry. And I started to get this reputation very quickly of having the best pitches in the industry. And it was like, I'm not really working that hard. And, I remember specifically, I was going to pitch CBS very early in my career. And I was waiting to go in the pitch room at CBS, and Simon Cowell walked out of the pitch before me. And I was like, oh my God, I got to follow Simon Cowell. This sucks. And so he comes and says hi, and we're jibber jabbering a little bit. I can see him looking over my shoulder, giving a nod. And I turn around, and it's Mark Burnett had just walked in. And so he was going to come next. One of the greatest television producers in my world. And I just got this feeling of dread that I am trapped between these two bookkeepers. And what is the president of the network going to talk? What does he want to hear from me? Right? What am I supposed to be talking about? Between these two. And so I just got this panicky thing of I got to get in and out of this room as fast as possible. Right? And we come in, and the agent introduces, talks what agents do. Hey, we got something really great for you. And as soon as I heard it, you bring your quit. And I pitched that show. Hey, here's what the show is. Here's how the show works. Here's why we think it's good for CBS. Here's what the budget range is. That's what we think we can produce. And I literally was out of the room in 9 minutes. And normally you're half hour, 45 minutes, yapping session. I was in and out in 9 minutes. And my agent said to me, as soon as we got in the hallway, he's like, oh my God, that was amazing. That was the best pitch I've heard you do. You got to do that from here on in. And so I started doing that, and we sold that show and other shows and so on. So, after the glitz and glamour of television wore off for me, and I decided to retire from the day-to-day of television. That's when I wrote the book, because I'd started helping other companies with their ideas and to develop them. And I didn't realize how the idea of condensing your information to the most clean, clear, and concise fashion could be a communication style for every business. And so then I went into the consulting side of it, and I've just been helping companies, CEOs, and people simplify their message and audiences with Hollywood storytelling techniques.
That's just amazing. Like, I love that. I love that you literally named two of the biggest names in entertainment, and that you're sandwiched them at this pitch and that experience for you. I love that you're admitting that, you were having this imposter syndrome, so to speak. I'm characterizing that, but that fear of like, oh my gosh, compared to these luminaries, who I'm not the, Yeah, exactly. But this idea that, I think we all deal with that. We all deal with that at some point in our careers and our lives. Like, oh my gosh, a comparative mindset where like, oh my gosh, I'm chopped liver next to whatever it is that we do. And the idea that actually you went in and being succinct and kind of being humble and being like, wow, I can't, I don't know that I can compete with them, but I'm just going to be me. And yet you set a standard now for the industry. From what I understand, and your book talks about this, I mean, everybody now understands they have to pitch their shows, but shorter, and executives now expect it. Like, you really did set the bar. You transformed an entire vertical in how things are done. Isn't that cool? What do you think about that? How does it make you feel thinking about that?
And I see all the time when I see other stuff, and I'll hear buyers will say that, like, yeah, this is the way Brant started this process, because, the biggest thing is that we live in an age of decision by committee, meaning like, you're not pitching somebody who's just going to pull up your checkbook and write your check. It doesn't work like that in the world. Like, everybody's asking other people's opinions and whatnot. So what I say is like, it's simplify or suffer. If you don't simplify your message, the person you pitch to will be simplifying it for somebody else. And then you got someone who doesn't care and doesn't know well regurgitating it. And it happened to me. I was at a meeting at National Geographic on a television show. One of my really close friends, the president of the network. I thought I was there to, pick them up for lunch, to have a celebratory thing, because it was a green light meeting where they go through all the pilots that they made and they green light the ones they like. And I get there and I'm waiting. And his assistant comes down and says, "Hey, Howard, love you to join the meeting." And I'm like, "What meeting are you talking about? We're supposed to be going to lunch." And it was the green light meeting was still on. And as a producer, I'd never been invited to one of those green light meetings. We're not supposed to be there. But he comes out in the hall and he goes, "Hey, listen, I knew you were down there waiting. It's not going well. Like, I'm trying to explain the show, but we went bad in the room. So I just told him to make a pause, and why don't you come and explain it and pitch it and like talk about it." And I was like, okay. So I went in there and, I explained the show, and it was vicious. There's 30 some odd people in this room, and they all wanted to absolutely crap on the idea, right? And that's what happens. And so I listened to him explain it, and I was like, "What show are you talking about? Like, that's not the one we've been working on." And I realized that, like, if you don't put your information in a format, in a structure, in a way that somebody else can explain it and maintain the value, you are going to lose the value in it. And that's what I started to do, religiously, was like create systems of pitching an idea that you could pitch to somebody else and they would be able to pitch it to someone else. It's not who you pitch to, it's who they pitch to that really sort of matters for you. And that was the book, trying to really hone that down.
That's incredible. I feel like some of the things you used were just very clear science-based understandings of how the brain works, right? And human nature. And maybe can you share like a highlight reel of like why succinctness, to keep it simple, stupid kind of a concept, like what you said, distilling it into the most important facts.
Well, there is science behind it, right?
Yeah, but just share whatever you want to share about the book.
And there is a lot of science. It sounds easy, like that sort of thing, just short. It's not really that. There's actually a scientific structure to the way human beings categorize information and how we make decisions. And as anybody listening will know, like, how many of you had someone come pitch or present or ask you something and yes or no in the first 30 seconds, first 10 seconds that they start talking, you're like, yeah, I'm not interested, right? And so as human beings, we make decisions in three compartments. First, we conceptualize, then we contextualize, then we actualize. And every decision, whether what you're going to have for lunch today, or whether we go to war with another country, or whether you kill your husband tonight in his sleep, like, those decisions are all the same exact structure. I conceptualize, I need to know what it is that I'm talking about, what it is I'm looking at, what it is we're dealing with. Then I contextualize as in, okay, now that I understand what that is, now I can understand how that relates to me and what it's going to be in my life. And then we actualize and be like, okay, I know what it is. I understand how it's going to relate to me. Now I make the decision on how to get involved or not get involved, or how much I'm going to spend, or what I want from it, or my next question. So those three processes are absolutely crucial. And every human being does that for every single decision. What is it? How does that actually work? How is it connected to me? And what do I got to do next? And that's the framework in the book is called the WAC method. What is it? How does it work? Are you sure? And can you do it? And when you put a pitch into those four categories in that order, it is wildly powerful because people will hear exactly what you're saying. They will understand what it is that you represent and the value you bring, and they will start to act and engage and discuss with you from a place of engagement and not a place from information. When they don't understand, they're looking for information. They're not making good decisions. They're just trying to figure it out. And when they go from a specific place of understanding, that means they want to find out details for them. They're looking to actualize it.
So, Brant, I think it's so powerful what you're talking about how we, you first have to conceptualize something. And so when you're pitching, you have to paint the picture. And you talked a lot about telling it in a story. You use these examples of like, it has to have something that grabs somebody so that stays with them, and you maybe share some of the projects you've done. Like, from what I understand, you guys were the first to really create the series arcs of live unscripted around weight loss shows. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about that because nobody at that point had been that audacious to have such a journey and with such unknown outcomes and stuff. Maybe you can share a little bit about that because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting, like on all my profiles and everything, it's people ask what shows you do, I always say like The Biggest Loser. If you actually ask what I did on The Biggest Loser, I'd be like, oh, nothing really. I mean, the show was already going. Was there, like I didn't have to do anything. That show was a monster on its own, right? Because of Brand, that show exists. There's none of that. But when I was with the company and I was like, what other weight loss shows are we doing? Like none? Like, how is that possible? And so we decided like, hey, we're going to corner the market in weight loss on television. What can we do? And one of the key pieces at the time for me is I had done a show when I was running the TLC network that was called My 600-Pound Life. It started out as almost like a feature documentary type special. And we had, we're getting 200,000 applications for The Biggest Loser a year. And there was always every year people that were just too big for The Biggest Loser. They weren't healthy enough. They couldn't move enough. It wasn't safe to have them on. They were just too big. And so we were always like, God, we should do a show with these people, but they're so fat that there's no way to get them thick. So that's when we came up with the idea of what if we could follow these people instead of being on a ranch for 6 weeks? What if we could follow them for 6 months or a year? And a year later, they're going to be fit. It'd be such a spectacular transformation. But then, weight loss is a little too slow for that. And how do you do that? We sort of came up with the idea of taking an entire year of the footage and then condensing it into one episode and filming for an entire year and staggering, right? No one had really done that before. And it was sort of a wild idea. And I spent, I don't know, I want to say a month, it might have been more, trying to figure out how to pitch that. It sounds good when I say it now, but that's because I've already done it. At the time, I'd bring people into the office and try to explain that was the plan for the show. And they'd be like, what? Who's going to be where with? Is anyone? And nobody can understand it. So into the details of it and the nature of it and how it was going to be. And eventually I just got so frustrated. I remember seeing all the Post-it notes on the wall and just seeing these highlighted ones that were basically these big bold letters of like, too fat for The Biggest Loser, follow them for 1 year, one episode, start out thin, and start out fat and thin, biggest weight loss on television. I was like, shit, that's really all I have to do. And I called the head of ABC and I was like, I need to see it today. I got something spectacular. Trust me. He's like, I'll give you 10 minutes or whatever he said. And he was angry and grumpy that I forced my rating schedule. And, I walked in and that's basically when I said, I want to show you this tape of this guy. It was the guy putting on his socks, 600-pound guy. It's so heartbreaking. And I just pitched that simple. It's like, these are contestants that are too big for The Biggest Loser. We're going to follow them for 1 year. They're going to lose weight. We're going to be with them, trainer embedded in their house. They're going to lose weight over the years. We're going to fill all of them at once. That's each one into 1 hour. They started the episode fat. They're going to end the episode thin. And I said, I was like, you might not even have your job by the time we get this on the air. It's going to take 18 months to film. So but that's the show. And just like, I just laid it on because I was trying to come up with ways of disguising that it was going to take 18 months to produce. I finally was like, here it is. And so they bought it. And then that was the door opening for all the other weight loss shows.
I mean, just to even think like, by making something that clear and that concise, that it could open up an entire avenue of all this creative content and all of this.
No pun intended, but it's so big and it was so outrageous. And the idea of filming a show for a year and not even getting one episode done and then trying to chop it all up and like, how are you going to afford that? Like, it was so over the top of an idea that no one had ever even thought of it. And so just the idea that you walk in the room and pitch the entire thing that you've been working on for months in 3 sentences, no one would have ever believed that. And I remember when I was driving to ABC, they're like, we're not ready. Why are you doing this? We're not ready. And I was like, we're overcooking. And I didn't even have a finished tape. All I had was one clip of one guy putting on his sock. And it was like, this is the people we're talking about. It's this simple. And I'm like, I'm leaving your office right now. I've already told you what it is. You don't get by that. I'm going to go sell it somewhere else. That turned like, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that, but that's sort of what he's like, well, anybody who says it that cleanly and that simply must have the goods. And it's funny because I get so many requests from so many companies to train their sales force to be more confident, right? And it's like, no, I can't train your sales force to act more confident. You can pretend to be confident, but everybody sees through that. The only way you have real confidence is in the value you believe you bring to others. If you believe what you bring has tremendous value, you will be confident, right? And I use the example, if I was coming to cater your wedding and you and your fiance were taking interviews with potential caterers to talk about the chef that I was going to use in the pitch. And my chef was Gordon Ramsay. And it's like, okay, how confident am I going to be that walking into the room, right? And then how many words would I need to pitch you my chef Gordon Ramsay, right? I have Gordon Ramsay. I wouldn't talk about his Michelin stars. I wouldn't do his techniques on his beef well. I wouldn't do any of that. I'd just be like, I got Gordon Ramsay. But conversely, if it was like, let's say my brother-in-law, ex-convict, tattooed, never been a chef before, but was really angry with me and is demanding I get him a job, like I would be less confident and I would certainly use a lot more words to try to sell you. Oh, it's not chef, it's ambiance. Like I would, and you would be like, I don't like, this doesn't smell right. Something's wrong, right? And so the more words you use versus the less words is inversely proportional to how confident you are. And your audience knows this. The more you speak, the lower their value and confidence they believe you have. The more you try to sell, the less value they believe. That's just the reality of the world we live in today. And so someone who lays it out cleanly, concisely, accurately, doesn't try to sell you, gives you the information, and lets it live on its own is like, whoa, something's going on here.
I love what you're saying. And it is convicting my soul because I'm someone who's long-winded and speaks a lot. So it's like, you're so right. When I look back on the times when I've had the greatest kind of connection when I'm communicating, it's because I know that I have the thing and it just doesn't need a lot. It's just like, hey, this is amazing. So when I'm in a good place, when I'm feeling whole, when I'm feeling like a lot of self-love, when I feel like resonant and present, yeah, I talk less, I listen more, I'm present, So I really love what you're saying. I do really enjoy, like, you have great energy and, I'm curious, like, do you think when you talk about you can't train someone to be confident, if somebody has a great thing that does have value, what if they just themselves have, don't have the charisma, don't have the, I don't know, the audacity. Do you think it is, do you see sometimes it's a bit of both too? Because it sounds like it sounds like the show you pitched to those executives that your other guy couldn't get across. you both had the same concept. You just had a certain gift of communicating it. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
It's interesting, but it's very counterintuitive. And I would say the people that I have the hardest time coaching are the big A-type personalities, like myself. Like, they don't want to listen. They want to use their personality and their charisma to overpower, and they don't want to do the work. They would rather be flashy and cool than actually do the work to get the information in the right format. And I've had such good luck in biotech and biomedical stuff, oil and gas, like the scientific spaces on public companies as well, because they don't want to do flashy promotional stuff. Like, you get a scientist and you tell them that, hey, listen, all I need is put your information in the right place. I don't care what kind of tie you wear. I don't care if you make eye contact with the audience. It doesn't really matter. Like, it's nice. It's a great bonus. But for the most part, it makes no difference whatsoever. You could almost read it. If it's good and it's well positioned and the information is clean, that's really what people are craving. They've got lots of people in matching suits and doing all the neuro-linguistic programming. We've all heard that a million times. That's not impressive. You know what it's like? It's a little bit like now when you order a package on Amazon, you order a product and it comes in one of those beautifully packaged in a box and it looks like Apple packaged it. You're like, whatever. Every single product comes in a beautifully packaged box now. Every single one. It used to be only Apple. You're like, wow, just the box alone of the new iPhone is amazing. Now it doesn't matter what you order. It comes in a nice package, right? It's the same thing. Like, I am like my issues with the neuro-linguistic world and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, if you think that those things still work, like, you are not paying attention. Like, everybody knows the tricks. Imagine, by the way, I don't know if you remember, but years and years we used to train salespeople to use your client's name. Lindsay, how are you today, Lindsay? Lindsay, how are things to you, Lindsay? It's like, could you imagine if someone did that to you today? You'd be like,
you'd know.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, you'd know.
I said my name over and over again. And it's like, that's the world we live in. If you lean into somebody in the elevator and be like, excuse me, I have an investment opportunity that can make you 10 times your money by the end of the year. Would that interest you? Like, nobody leans in and goes, ooh, tell me more, right? Like, that's not the way the world works. We've been trained so long to use what's called the state improve method. I'm going to give you something that you want, make a big statement. You go, oh yeah, I want that. Prove back. Would you like to lose weight and still eat anything you want? Oh yes, Brant, I would. Okay, well, let me show you this new diet plan, right? Like, sure, if you could get a time machine, go back to the 1980s, you could use that. But nowadays, people are just skeptical of every single thing that comes through. And I train people how to use what's called the inform and lead method, which is what Hollywood does, right? We give you the information and lead you to a conclusion. So if you're looking at, like, my favorite movie, Shawshank Redemption, we don't start the movie with Andy Dufresne escapes from this horrific prison where he's bullied and objectified. Here's why he does it. Like, that's not, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, but he escapes. So we don't do that, right? We tell you who he is, what he's going through, we lead you through, and at the end, you've seen the movie 15 times, you still want him to escape. Like, you want the outcome. I lead you to that outcome. You can't really have another outcome. You don't watch that movie and be like, I wish he just stayed in that prison. This is so boring. Like, that's the way this world works, right? And you can use that in pitches and presentation communication. You can lead your audience with good storytelling structure and simplified messaging, and they will understand the conclusion that you want them to. And it's a very powerful method.
That is so inspiring to me when you talk about how, things of yesteryear that we used in sales tactics and interpersonally as human beings are just gone and they've been overplayed and overdone and now we're skeptical. That just resonates. I mean, of course, right? And we've seen all the commercials. We've done it like gross. No, it has to be done different. I mean, the infomercial of this year, for example, is long form entertainment, just make you laugh. Like, right? Like, you tell about the product by making jokes, and like, the Harmon brothers who I've worked with extensively, who created, Squatty Potty and Poopery and Purple Mattress and all that. And they basically they nailed that. But now there's a bunch of Me Too's and a lot of people are copying that model. Right. And we get tired of the same.
And by the way, if you look at the success of that model, like, if you looked at the success of that model now, you see that walking to camera, single frame shot, making a joke of the product. It's like, it's already the beginning of an eye roll. It is this close. And in another year, that system will be dead because you'll be like, I've seen this all before. It does not mean the product is clever or interesting anymore, right? It used to. Now I'm not sure. And soon I'll be like, I'm done with it.
And the skeptic comes from, oh, okay, I get what they're doing. They're selling me, and they're just doing what it's like. There's no wonderment. There's no surprise. It doesn't lead you, like you just said. You're not being led anywhere. It's like, I know what's going on here. You're going to make me laugh and tell me the quirky things about this thing. Dumb. And also the jokes are really similar, and the products are kind of similar. They're quirky products they have to explain, and you know what I mean, and all that stuff. And you see a lot of brands trying it that aren't quirky products, and it really falls flat. Like, here's why this t-shirt's better than all t-shirts, and I'm going to make as many jokes as I can about it. It's like, I'm over this. It's also like the long-form content. So I really think you're right. Like, things have a shelf life. And so what do you think it is how can we be, as people that are communicating values, so many people that will be listening to this podcast are people that want to convey, like I said, they may be entrepreneurs. They may want to just convey their own value to their boss to get a raise. They might be missionaries of whatever, evangelicals of whatever they, want to share in their world. It might be a musician that wants to communicate the message of their song and what their church purpose is. We all want to communicate to other human beings effectively, to be fully known and chosen, right? So what can we be attuned? What do you think it is about your mindset that helps you see this when other people don't see it? Like, kind of my mentor always talked about, what is common sense isn't common practice, Like, when you said all these things in the book, I was listening to 3-Minute Rule and I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, why hasn't anyone said it this way? But it's so obvious when it's pointed out so succinctly. And a lot of what you're saying today just has such elegance and clarity. But what do you think it is about your mindset, or how can we look at the world in a way that will be help us to have an open aperture for what's up next?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you have to understand that you know your information on an intimate level. And so you have the perfect understanding of value of every nuanced detail, every stitch, every piece, every investment quote. Like, those numbers. And so you then assess value as an aggregate of all that information. So that's why it's so good for you. You love it. And what I would say, and then I think probably now the number one thing I say to clients after we get through is I have to say, I promise you'll get to say that. Like, I promise you'll get to say that. We just can't say that right now. Just wait. Because they love their information so much. And so, the number one thing is, like, you just have to understand that when you're talking to somebody else, they do not have a foundation of understanding. They are starting from zero. So you got to give them the basics. And what I find is interesting is some of the hardest work I do is with companies in the very first line. When I say Lindsay Adley is a blank that does blank. And it's like, I'm not going to put you on the spot because we would be here for 25 minutes trying to figure this out. Because I've had major companies and they're like, well, we're not an investment arm. We're up at this. And it's like, getting it down to one word is like, it's really hard because your product, and you know it so well, you know all the things, you know where you want to go, you know what you want to do, you know every detail. It's like, can you just tell me what this is? I just got off of Zoom. It's like, we are an auto manufacturer. Okay, because you make an automobile. Can we all agree? And they're like, fine, to 25 minutes. Yes. Okay. You're an auto manufacturer and you license heritage vehicles from car manufacturers. Okay, so you're going to take the Lamborghini Countach from Lamborghini and license it and go make a modern version of it. It's like, that's super cool. Just need you to start with, like, you're an automaker, so we understand you make cars, right? Like, they want to talk about value, the prestige, history, and it's like, can we just explain to people what it is? And it's like, that's the core message. Just tell people the simplest version. I promise you'll get to say everything else. It doesn't end just in that one thing. There'll be lots of things you get to say. Trust me, just start with the basics. This is what we do.
That's amazing. There's so much to learn in what you're talking about. And I'm curious, like you mentioned earlier that Hollywood, you've got I don't know, disenchanted, jaded. I don't know what your exact term was, but the feeling I got was like
All of the above.
the luster wore off of this whole world of entertainment in Hollywood. Can you talk a little bit about that and why, and like what you're doing now? Because I'm sitting here like, you haven't even pitched me anything about your services, and I'm like, I want to hire you right now. I want you to work with me to help us better communicate our value at Capita. I want you to help me with making TV and film. I want you to help my dad's business. I'm like sitting here thinking of all the people that I want your gifting to, and all you've been doing is showing up with that clarity of like you said, the value. But tell us and the listeners how they can work with you now, and like what took you to what you're doing now too.
The pivotal moment was one of my very first events. I was at a bar in Los Angeles. I was pitching show ideas to my family. They were visiting from out of town. I was telling about the stupid networks that was passing on these amazing ideas, and everybody had been drinking, and there was a crowd gathering around. I was pitching these cool ideas, and this guy came up to me and he says, "Hey, can you do this for my clients? Can you show my clients how to do what you do?" And I was like, "No, I can't train people how to pitch TV shows." He's like, "No, I want you to teach my clients how to pitch their ideas and their companies without putting people to sleep." And he ran a huge investment bank, and he was doing these investment conferences. And I happened to be in Florida the week he was having one. I went and saw him. He introduced me to this oil and gas guy. And I sat through his presentation, 23 minutes. It's the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. And it's a $2 billion company, public company. And I was like, how could anybody want to be involved with someone who's spoke like I have no idea what he was even talking about? So, they asked me, "What did you think?" He's like, "Well, I don't know. Can I hear it again? Let me give you some feedback. Let me hear more." So and he said something, and I said, after the second one, I was like, "Did you, just let me be sure, you said you were still able to drill at $32 a barrel while the other areas, they're laying down their rigs at $37. He's like, "Yeah, because of the lease." I was like, "It took you 17 minutes to say that." So we reorganized the slides. It went much better. He was like, "Can I hire you to come in and redo my entire presentation?" And I was like, I got a job. But he asked really nicely, and he flew out to Los Angeles on the weekend, and we got on this fancy boardroom hotel, and I spent 2 days just breaking it down like I would a TV show. And he seemed like he had a great time. Everybody was happy. And 2 weeks later, he left a voice message on my phone. And he's just like, he was on the verge of tears. And he's just said, "You changed my life. I used to dread going out on the road and these conversations, and now I'm excited. We completed our raise. My wife thinks you did put something in my food. Like, I'm so happy. I'll never forget what you've done for me." And I was just like, what the hell? Like, no network president had ever said anything like that to me ever before. And I'm like one chromosome away from being a caveman. And so my ego was like, "Yeah, what's more of that?" And so you want to make friends with an investment banker, just make them some money. Boom. And he's like, "I got more clients for you." I was like, "You send them my way." So that was sort of the beginning of it. And now I'm sort of in the mode where I'm trying to focus on, I'm in the relentless pursuit of enjoyment in my life. I like to help people. I don't sell a course. I don't sell extras. I'm not telling other people how to get rich or do what I do. Just trying to help people communicate better. I don't need to sell any more books. It's great to sell books. I don't mind if I don't sell anymore. I sell more. Great. But if you reach out to me, you have a question, you want my opinion, I'm happy to help wherever I can. I love that stuff. So
as you're looking at your next kind of phase, are there certain brands or verticals or people that you want to work with? Is there something that kind of does? Like, I love that you got that purpose jolt from his being like, "You changed my life." I mean, I've spent 20 years in the nonprofit sector, and, I like to think that, that the stuff that I've done has mattered and helped and made a difference in people's lives. But there's nothing like one individual coming up to me and be like, "This is what you did for me." You know what I mean? There's nothing like that.
And it's been an evolution, right? Because when I first got started, I wanted logos, right? I wanted big fancy companies I could put logos, and I chased logos. Then it was like, then I got into the public company space, and I was helping micro cap and small cap companies, and I was, making a fortune on stock options because, they're companies nobody's heard of, publicly traded. They start telling a good story, all of a sudden their stock goes up and everybody's happy, right? So I've gone through those iterations, but what I started to find is I working with very large companies, and, they'd be all great and they'd clap and tell me I'm pretty, which I kind of need. But for the most part, like, I didn't really change their business. It's good. I trained, I did a lot for Bank of America, and it's like, I don't know if you go to Bank of America, you notice any difference. And there's not anybody in there saying like, "Oh, thanks for Brant Pinvidic. That's why we're so good today." Like, So I was missing a little of that. And I also found that I didn't have time for some of the stuff that I love. Like I loved working with entrepreneurs and small businesses and startups, and I wasn't doing. And so I started trying to do more stuff. So I started doing these sort of events, a place in Florida where I would bring in people from my group that would, come into my stuff through my website. I would, they wouldn't be able to afford to hire me, but I'd like, hey, you can come down, spend a day at my beach place, and we'll take an afternoon and go through your stuff, right? And like make a donation to my charity or whatever. And I found that super rewarding because it's like companies I wouldn't normally get to work with. And so I sort of evolved into this, like, you know what, like, well, I'll just help you for, just let's have a conversation for free, no obligation. It gives me the ability to help some people. I don't have to say no because I'm not very good at that. Everybody tells me how pretty I am. Like I said, it's kind of important. And then as things go through, and there's people that like, there are certain companies and elements and startups that I just go like, oh my God, I can't not get involved with that. Like I have to help that company. That's amazing, right? Like I told you the other day, like I have this company that's an AI cancer-based company, use AI to help, advance cancer patients with their alternative treatments. It's like, yes, I have to work with those companies. So it's like, is it good people? Is it fun? Is there something interesting about it? Like I'm in a mode in that midlife crisis where it's just, I just want to do fun stuff with fun people. I don't want to waste time, doing the standard same stuff I do. So.
Yeah, I love that, Brant. My friend of mine said the other day, Lindsay, the first 20 years of your career and life, or it's your career life, I should say. So from like your 20s to your, 40s, like is all what you said yes to. And the next 20 years will be defined by what you said no to. And I thought that was really cool because I think that is a discipline of being like, that's not for me. And it just doesn't resonate. And it's not about the external validation or even the paycheck. It's like, gosh, I have limited time on this earth and I want to enjoy who I do it with and what I'm doing. And I want to believe in it. And we get a lot of joy from purpose as human beings. So I kind of circling back again to this thing about the entertainment industry. What was it was it the fact that people didn't appreciate each other? Was it the, quintessential, like, oh, it's, snake oil sales guys everywhere. Like, what was it that really like turned you off? You're like, I can't stomach this anymore.
It's a very insecure, schizophrenic type community, right? We don't have marketable skills. That's a problem. If you're a doctor, you went to school, you got a degree, you have marketable skill. If you're a TV executive or a movie producer, you got nothing. And we're all, the guy, my buddy who used to run ABC said, we're all just one bad email from everyone figuring out we're a fraud, right? And so you run around that world, but it's so pervasive, the idea that, you need to have connections, you need to be friends with everybody. You don't know who's going to get what job when. And it's just exhausting. It's an exhausting process. And the creative element of it just was sucked out of it. It's basically like a widget making business. I'm just creating new shows I try to come up with every day. I'm pitching them all every week. Like there's nothing special in anything. And it's just really daunting when you don't know what the audience is going to respond to and you're not responsible. You don't decide what network, what time the network puts it on or what's happening in the world. And like, you don't get to play any of that. And so you put your heart and soul into a show and no one watches it. That sucks. You don't even care about a show and everyone watches it. And I've had every version. I have had shows where I've spent every second in the edit phase, every single scene, know every nuance, did it myself, personally oversaw it. I've had shows that I pretended like I was going to watch. I told the network I was in the Bay and I never saw a single episode and they were against. So it's like, and every version of that in between, you're like, what am I doing that has any difference in anything? And so, you start to realize you're going from deal to deal, just looking for the bigger deal, the bigger paycheck. I got to go pitch. And I wrote an article for Forbes about it, I lost my company's biggest deal. It was like, I had a huge order for a series and one phone call, they said, hey, we're not doing the series anymore. And it was an $8 million swing production. And it went from me $3 million over budget, like over target for that year, to almost $5 million under target for the year. And there's no time to make that up. It's the end of the year and the show just went away, right? And so I remember how miserable I was for weeks. And I thought, how is it possible I gave the power to make me this emotional over to someone I barely know, who isn't even at a job that I would have. This is someone who I would hire someone to hire somebody to hire someone. And that person able to basically ruin weeks of my life. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
That's fair. That's really fair. Was there any, I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm like, okay, so I'm getting into the producing world and I've been making film and stuff. And I'm like, I find, and maybe because it's not my full-time job and I haven't been in, I'm not dated and I'm doing it as a moonlighting hobby. Like I sit there and think, but movies have shaped me. Like I text my friend today, he was a student of mine at the university and he's an amazing cinematographer and he hasn't seen a lot of the classics. Like you mentioned Shawshank and right. I love Shawshank Redemption and Schindler's List and Last Mohicans and Dance with the Wolves and Braveheart. Like he's younger. I forget that we're getting old, Brant. This is crazy, right? I'm turning 40 this year. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, this 20-year-old sweetheart kid hadn't seen all of these films that I think like have shaped, the zeitgeist of the culture we grew up in. And I'm like, you got to watch these as like a budding filmmaker, right? And so much film can be used to do good. And I'm sitting here thinking about all the people's lives you transformed by helping them lose weight. I mean, does that not weigh up in it when you looked at like, because the scale or I'm sure there were edifying things like most things, there's a shadow side and it just got too much for you of the negative? Or how do you feel about that?
The number of people involved in those shows and those movies to get them to be where they're at, it's like, yeah, you can take credit for that when it serves you. But in the real world, it's like, it was a great TV show. I made a movie called Why I'm Not a Pokemon Go about my relation with my daughter, which I may have got more mail and things than I even did for any of the weight loss shows, just on how, help people relate to their children and stuff, which was really work to me. I'm really proud of that. But it's like, that was outside of the business of it. And by the time you do something on a mainstream level and it gets into the marketplace, like you have to stretch to make it be like it was your thing. Even if you wrote it, if you wrote that movie, it's like, okay, all right, I'll give you that one. You did great. But if you were a producer on it it's a village and it's amazing. But what's really hard for people to grasp in this world is that what you're talking about, the movies that shape you are iconic, one in a bazillion movies, right? And there's just the catastrophic odds against you being involved in one of those is next to none, right? And so for the most part, what most people do is it turns into an actual job and a real business. And it isn't a glorified creative endeavor where you're on set checking, that's not the real world. Like it happens. I'm sure it happens to a few people here and there. Look at Sylvester Stallone. I have had people come into my office many, many times, want to be the star of this and their own thing that they wrote. And I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, well, Sylvester Stallone, he sold his dog and he stuck with it. And I was like, okay, you got one good example. Like if you want to, and sure, I guess that's fine for you, but that's just like the exception.
Yeah.
It's not a glorious business.
That's good to know. Yeah.
There are some trappings around it, which are really cool, but the lucrative nature of it creates a level of competition that's also very unpleasant. Like every single level of this business is wildly competitive. And so it's really lucrative at a certain level for certain people. But you have people that are juniors, producers, or managing directors and these level, and it's like, okay, it took you 15 years to get this level. If you would have just gone to work at a bank, you'd be a multi-millionaire by now. You would have just picked one thing to focus on, and I've had that where, people started out as my assistant 15 years ago, and now they're, vice president of development at Netflix. And it's like, whoa, wait, all their friends are already rich families at, high level, and they're just clawing every job, every single position he's trying to hold on to because there's just unlimited amounts of people that want to get into that world.
That's so interesting. Well, I'm thinking of kind of switching this into outside of the entertainment industry. I'm like, I mean, I feel like everything that reaches market scale is a village to create it. I mean, like everything. I don't know of a thing that doesn't have massive impact. You want to become a billionaire, help a billion people. You know what I mean? Like the value that you have to create to have that kind of, impact. No one's going to accomplish that alone. No one. And so, and I also just think about any endeavor, whether you're an entrepreneur, an author, or a coach, right? Like, to really continue to scale it, you have to have people around you and systems and refinement, right? And you can turn anything into a job. I think because I'm thinking of my friends who are filmmakers, and I know exactly what you're talking about when you describe this kind of like cycle where you can see the soul's been sucked out of them, but they really started out as like a creative genius and someone who was starry-eyed and a believer, and then they like slowly die. But like, I've seen that in every industry. Like, I see that in every single industry. You can find people who have somehow lost themselves in the chasing of whatever this thing outside of them. And that's where...
And some people love that. Some people are addicted to it. I remember I did a show called Secret Life of Soccer Mom. And it was basically stay-at-home moms that keep their careers to raise family, got a chance to go back and secretly live the life that they would have had they stuck with the job. And it was like this thing born to my wife.
That's a cool idea.
It was amazing. And I tried to get it made for a long time, couldn't get it made. I finally got this fancy job at a network and I bought it from the company that I originally worked for, and I bought it. And I got this producer, and we made it, and she showed me the first episode and I cried. I was crying.
Oh.
It was just so overwhelming that I finally got this show that I was so inspired by. And it went on the air, basically flopped, and the critics not only didn't like the show, they didn't understand. They thought it was like, they didn't like the tone of it. They thought it was shitting on stay-at-home moms. And I was just like, oh my God, it's the complete opposite. And it was devastating. And I was just like, yeah. And so some people are addicted to that process, right? They will go through hell.
Yes.
For that one moment where they get the shine. I'm just like,
you couldn't handle it. Yeah. You're like, no.
Yeah, I don't want to. And you know what I mean? Like, nah, I want to feel good more often.
Yeah, that's so fair. That's so fair.
I don't want to put my the stuff and have it, And when I found I do stuff on my own, I can control all that.
Yeah, so, that's true in business too. I feel like as I've matured as a professional, the more that you can be like, I'm not handing over my power or having blind faith in some random person. Like, either you find a system that is absolutely winning, like, just people in a thing that has real there, and then you attach yourself to it, or you hold some things that you have to control, and those are usually the things that really are successful. And there's a lot of, variant factors that can play where you don't have control. That's where things can really increase the risk, right? So as you're a dad, you said of 3 kids, and you said this show inspired you about your wife as a stay-at-home mom. Has she been a stay-at-home mom through all of your career journey? And tell me a little about your family and like what you guys are about.
We moved down to the United States from Canada. She couldn't get a work visa, so it was that move from being a high-level career woman to full-time stay-at-home. We had 1 kid when we moved. She's pregnant the second, and then you go from that to a stay-at-home mom, like really with 3 young ones at home. It's a big transition. And so watching her wrestle with all of that was the inspiration for that sort of show. So, but like Canada, people always ask me to go back to Canada. I was like, only if I can leave again. And it's like, I'm Canadian by birth, but America is what gave me everything in my life. And Canada was just basically a pain. Every day of my life was a struggle. For the first 27 years that I lived there, it was just nothing worked. And I moved to Los Angeles and everything worked. And relationships and people and the tone and attitude, everything just fit. And this is where my people were. So I think that's a big thing for people as well. Is like, you have to find where your people are. And because you grew up somewhere, because you're at some place, it doesn't mean that that's where you have to stay. If you find your people, it really unlocks a lot about who you are and what you could be.
Totally. Gosh, that's so true. And I think sometimes people have a lot of loyalty to family or origin or history or whatever, and that can be a beautiful thing for them. But other people, it's like you can pave your own path and find your tribe and jettison what was. And It's a pretty cool thing, like the sanctity of choice. But I'm realizing we're like right at the top of the hour. You've been super gracious, Brant, and I love talking to you. I'm like dying to work with you more. I'm so excited. So what's any last things you want to share with the audience, or anything you want to say that, like, parting words of wisdom to the soul?
Yeah, it's like you said. Always remember, it's only what needs to be said, not what you want to say. Right? I know you want to say everything. Focus on what needs to be said to get your point across.
Woo! And there you go. Thanks so much, Brant. Thanks for being on the show. Appreciate you. Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.